This is a Promicro video. My name is Tonie. Last time we talked about Codex, OpenAI's agent in the cloud to do development work. Today I want to look more into the environments of Codex, because the environments here in the screen are your repository configuration together with an image that's provided by ChatGPT or by OpenAI. And at the moment there's only one image to be selected, and that's the universal image. And the universal image is installed with all kind of cool tools, but if you're using .NET, it's not really interesting to work with these tools. So what I was asking myself, can I install more? Well, yeah, you can, because you can run a setup script, but is there also another way? Well, I found that Juan Pablo wrote an interesting gist on GitHub where he installed Postgres on a container, on the universal image containers, to run his integration tests. So I thought, if he could install Postgres, can I install .NET? And the answer is actually pretty straightforward, because that's the reason why I'm making this video. Yes, you can. So what was my plan of approach? I installed Docker Desktop, I downloaded the container of OpenAI, and I started hacking with Bash, trying to install stuff. And as example, I started with the Postgres, but after a while I went for .NET. And all that effort I wrote down in 2 scripts. So I wrote a script how to install and mount a Postgres database on your specific OpenAI container. And I wrote this little script to install, here it is, .NET. So the only thing I just needed to do is to let the container know when it clones a repository that it should run the scripts before it does anything. And the way that works is configuring an agent markdown file. So in this agent markdown file, there's a lot of human readable code, but all those steps will be digested by the agent, and the agent will install these 2 things because it's in the agent.md. So with a repository with the scripts and an agent set up with Postgres and .NET, why, Tonie? What do you want to do next? Well, I wrote a README file with the future use of this repository. So I was like imagining that this would have a Blazor frontend and a .NET API and a Postgres database which you could access via the API. And with that in mind, I wrote this features and setup, etc., etc. And then I thought, this looks like an interesting assignment for Codex. So I asked Codex, create the app according to the specs in the README, and also create a database and initial seed data. To test the seed data then, and write the code, test, and documentation. And if you ask a question to Codex, you can go up to 4 different versions. I only chose 2 versions, and this video is only 10 minutes long, so I will only show you version 2. So in version 2, it created a solution, it created migration files because it chose to use Entity Framework for Postgres. It wrote the rest of the API, so the backend code, and it also wrote the frontend code. So normally I would say create pull request, because Codex did some work, but then I ran into an error and I want to check the work, I want to see what Codex did. But this binary file are not supported error message is probably due to a file icon it created. And that's a binary format. So somehow OpenAI blocks this. I was stuck. I couldn't work further with this Codex work, but I still want to check what it was. So what can I do then? Well, the options are to create or actually copy, the git apply. So the code that Git would apply to his repository. So if you click this button, you can copy the git apply. And this is that git apply. It's 1200 lines of code with all the additions and things Git would remove. And if you then run git patch, you can apply it to your master or your new repository and get the same effect as the pull request. And that's exactly what I did. I applied the code to my local repository, created a commit, and pushed it to a new branch called v2. v2 edited by the human, because I used the artificial generated code, but I applied some fixes to get it in the system. The interesting thing is that although the backend looks very specific for my use case, if I scroll down to, for example, the pages, you will see that the normal, or actually the default pages of a Blazor app are there. So the home, the weather, and the counter. So no real Whisky things I asked for. So the next thing I did, I run Codex again, but now on this branch. And asked, focus on the front end, implement the API, make dark themed interface with gold yellow text, make it fancy and expensive looking. It's a Whisky site, so a bit of bling bling would be nice. And please remove this default razor pages. And this is where it gets interesting. And not only interesting, but also working. This time, Codex took a little more than 5 minutes, but it agreed on my assignment because it removed the counter and the weather pages, and it generated a new page called Notes. And this Notes page is exactly the tasting notes page I asked for in the initial README file. And although the website was working, front-end, back-end, and also the Postgres database, I still wasn't satisfied because I was missing a possibility to add nodes. So the next thing I did, I asked again, add the possibility to post a new tasting node on the nodes page. The user must click a big golden plus, and a pop-up will come up with all fields for the API. Well, some mandatory fields, etc., etc. And again, a little over 5 minutes, and the agent came with just one, or actually two additions, and well, the page looked like it would work. There was a nice little big golden plus, but it didn't. Nothing popped up. Interesting. So again, I asked, there's a bug in the node page. It will not open or render. Please fix it, and also alter the CSS because it was a little bit too much gold. Well, we only have 1 more minute left. And in this last minute, I like to show you the commits that were made. So the first commit was actually done by me, but it was the git apply. The second commit was done by the agent, which implemented the dark theme in the notes page. Then I had to fix a little HTTP client implementation. I also added some extra information to run Postgres locally. Then the node creation page was added. I also asked for a progress bar. And it tried to fix the loading of the page, but it failed. And the human, myself, need to step in and fix a little bit styling and fix the page. And this was the end result. So if I pull up Visual Studio Code and now I run the backend project, you will see it will be building, and you see a lot of output information, but this is something you would recognize as a SQL query, and this is the query to the Postgres database. And the same I will run for the front end. And if I now go back to my page and click on the nodes, I will see tasting notes of an artback with 90 out of 100 score, and a Glenlivet, and a Patrickson, and a Clay, and a Tonie Distill & Co. It's a very new distillery, very good. And a Millstone, something we are pretty proud of in the Netherlands. Just like Clay, also a Dutch Whisky. If I click the big plus, I can fill in again something from Clay, but now a younger one. And I will give it a 99 out of 100. And the tasters are you, YouTube audience. And when I push save, I will hide the code again and scroll down. You will see the Clay 5 with a 99 out of 100. And this is just the front end, because in the backend, this is NET API, which is also documented in Swagger, with a get and a post to get and post those tasting notes. So we're a little bit over 10 minutes. This was the second video on OpenAI's Codex. I hope you like it. See you in the next one.